Good evening, Notre Dame fans. This is Mike Singer at blueandgold.com, joined by former Fighting Irish linebacker and captain Mike Goolsby to discuss Notre Dame's 31-14 loss against the Alabama Crimson Tide in the semifinals of the college football playoff Rose Bowl game played in Arlington, Texas. I'll get into some housekeeping items, but first, Mr. Goolsby, I figured I will give you the floor and let's hear about your initial takeaways from the game. You might need to take 10 minutes here. Take as long as you need.
I'll try and keep it brief for once in my life. I was texting you during the game, Mike, like obscure question, but what's the worst movie you've ever seen? And to which you responded, Sharknado. Um, Awful movie. So this game, as a fan watching on the couch, was like being forced to watch Sharknado. Like it was going to be terrible, and you knew what the ending was going to be because you've seen it before. So I don't think Notre Dame embarrassed themselves today. I do think, and we talked briefly before going on air here today, it didn't seem like Bama was that juiced up, that they didn't really try that hard, is what you had said. And I agree. They did kind of take a professional approach to the game in terms of their execution, but it didn't feel like Alabama was necessarily up for this game. And kind of a lost opportunity for us to capitalize on maybe a slight lack of motivation, or they perceived they were going to win easily, which more or less they did. But yeah, we didn't see Notre Dame once again sort of either match the level of competition or exceed the level of competition. They played really, really hard once this year, and that was our first go around with Clemson. So yes, there's a talent gap. We all knew that was going to become evident today, and it did. Just there's I'm sure there's some takeaways here once you kind of get into the film. We did a pretty good job defensively in terms of keeping their total points down, but it just watching it on the first watch, it didn't feel like, Mike, we did anything outside of a hurry up, a few, a little sprinkling of some hurry up offense. It didn't seem like we did anything outside of ourselves, and we probably would have had to pull off a W in this scenario. So great season, but a lot, still left to be desired.
I want to take a quick minute to let you guys know that it helps out our channel a ton here at blueandgold.com. If you would go ahead and whether you're watching live with us or watching back on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to us on YouTube. Look, we are just getting started with our coverage of Notre Dame football and even basketball and recruiting of both sports on our YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe to our channel to lock into all of that. And our podcast audience, for those wanting to just kind of stay on that platform, we would also encourage you to join us on our YouTube page. And you can personally email me, msinger@blueandgold.com. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to guide you to our YouTube channel if you're having problems finding out. And while you're listening via podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. That really helps us out as well. I guess my first thing, let's go to Mike, is kind of you liked this. It was closing the book on Ian Book in today's game. 27 of 39, 229 yards, and the interception. That interception, I feel like you shouldn't have thrown that ball. If you're going to throw that ball, you got to get some air under it. It looked like he was throwing it right to the Alabama defender. So, Mike, you've been an Ian Book supporter. I certainly have backed the young man as well, but it just. He's not Mac Jones. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's a fine college player. He's going to go down, or he already has, as winning the most starts at quarterback in Notre Dame football history. But just closing the book on Mr. Book.
There's one thing I want to say before I get to that. So throughout the broadcast, they said Mac Jones graduated in 2.5 years. And now he's got his master's. So obviously a high academic kid, kind of waited his turn behind Hurts and Tua in front of him. But he's a stud quarterback. And then Book got dinged up on that sack that he took. He goes out of the game. Drew Pine comes in. Drew Pine, 5'11", 194 pounds, and I just got my kind of mind racing. And we played another, like, if we're going to become an elite program, obviously the quarterback's the most important position on the field. Clemson's backup is a 6'4", 250-pound, five-star true freshman with a rocket arm. Our backup's a 5'11", 190-pound kid. He looks like a regular student at Notre Dame. No offense to anybody, but he doesn't necessarily look like a Division I quarterback. So you're like, well, did we offer Mac Jones? And apparently we never offered Mac Jones. So he's a high academic kid. He's got all the intangibles. He's got the stature. He's got the arm, the football IQ, but we don't offer a kid like that. So it's interesting. But moving on to Ian Book, we should all be grateful for Ian Book. He's a guy that I hope young kids kind of look up to. He's a scrapper. He's a competitor. He makes the most of his ability. And we all knew he had shortcomings. He had an up and down career, but won a lot of games. There's always going to be the question of what could have been had you had a five-star prototypical stud quarterback back there. But I've been pretty adamant about my fandom and my support of Ian Book. And, today is a snapshot of Ian Book, like kind of in a nutshell. Like, he's fighting literally down to the last second, scrambling for first downs, gets knocked out of the game, comes back. So the will to win is strong with that kid. The ability to pull the trigger sometimes isn't as strong. I mean, his best throw of the game was late over the middle to Ian Book, takes a shot right in his face mask. And so it's maddening. It's been maddening, and it's been fun to watch him because he'll hang in the pocket and deliver on that throw. But the half a dozen opportunities that he had in previous games, or every game almost, where he doesn't pull that trigger. So, but we all have a lot to be grateful for, and should really think highly of Ian Book. We really should, as he closes out his career. Won a ton of games for us, helped us win a lot of games. And again, just made the most of his ability. And I'm proud of him for that. Absolutely.
Mike, I guess watching the game, it's like, all right, Alabama, a college team could never beat an NFL team. That's 1,000% the truth. But Alabama just has so many NFL guys on the team. And look, Notre Dame, their 2 losses this season against the 2 best teams in college football, against the 2 best teams in college football the past 5, 7, 8 years. They've just, I mean, yeah, Alabama and Clemson have just been better than everyone. It's not even close. So would you say that this game, and even the ACC championship game, is it more, does it speak to just how dominant Alabama is, or is it, look, they're not that amazing, and Notre Dame just hasn't closed the gap, or is it just like kind of somewhere in between?
Short answer, it's probably somewhere in the middle there, Mike. Yeah, I think I really tried to delve into this on our last podcast, Mike, following our second game with Clemson. Like, there's a weird culture thing where, like, Bama isn't taking in the highest academic kids, yet you rarely, if ever, hear about any sort of off-field incidents. And as much of a hard ass as Saban is, or seems to be, has stuck up for his kids and is a big fan of giving kids second chances, etc. So in terms of closing that talent gap, I really do feel like Notre Dame's built a tremendous culture in terms of developing young kids on and off the field. And sometimes I feel like our focus is slightly more so towards developing kids off the field than on. So I just really feel like, man, to close that talent gap, you have to take in some of these kids that may not be, they're not going to be, junior college transfers that are poor students, but guys that are sort of in the middle of the road, and you take them into that culture, and they'll thrive. So I think that's what it's going to take to close the talent gap. Um, and then you talk about Bama. Could they beat a pro team? Of course not, but that's a real big part of what that culture that Alabama has built over there and that Nick Saban's built. Is like dudes go there to get to the league. It's like, um, and it's like you're going to sign to Alabama. You're going to give me everything you've got for 3 years, and in exchange, you make several $1 million. And it's almost like the agreement over there. So they've got to figure it out. Um, I don't know how, like I said, we said earlier, I don't know how up for the game Alabama was. Um, and then, like, specifically, I think halfway through the third quarter, Nick Saban started rolling in his backups. So I do feel like it could have got ugly. Um, and maybe we should be appreciative of Nick Saban for kind of calling off the dogs, as it were.
Except for those who took, Alabama, at minus 20 or minus 19 and a half, or that, that those folks certainly aren't too happy. I think that kind of leads us into a question from Patrick Barnes here, and he also drops us a $5 super chat. We really appreciate that, Patrick, and all of your support. We've done these live shows after every game this year. Of course, this is Notre Dame's final game of the 2020-2021 season. Just again, we really have appreciated all the support and everyone who's been watching these live shows. We really would appreciate the super chats, guys. That's basically like a tip if you enjoy watching our shows here and listen to our podcast. So we really appreciate that, Patrick. His question is, do you think Notre Dame looked better in this game than past, big bowl games, whether it was Ohio State 5 years ago, or I guess 6 years ago now, Clemson in 2018, Clemson just in December, like you said, Saban probably could have ran up the score because they just made it look so easy. They weren't even really trying to put up a ton of points. That's why they only put up 31 when and that was their lowest point total in 25 games. Maybe it's a situation of Saban just has a ton of respect for Brian Kelly to want to run up the score. Yeah, I mean, so do you think this Notre Dame team looked better in this championship game than past, or is it look? I mean, it doesn't really matter.
I think it doesn't really matter. It's a good question. I would think that yes, I think we did look better because we didn't embarrass ourselves. So the average fan is going to look at the score and be like, all right, Notre Dame hung in there, which we did. We didn't get embarrassed like that our national championship game appearance against Clemson years ago, or excuse me, against Bama years ago, where we got boat raced and it was hard to watch. And so yeah, we did fare better today, but yeah, I would say, to answer the question, yes, we looked better. Very generically, we looked better. But it was pretty apparent early on in that game where it's like Bama could do whatever they kind of wanted with us. We had a nice long drive, and that seemed to sort of tamp down their energy a little bit, and then they just kind of handled business from there.
Popping up a picture on the screen, Najee Harris's hurdle over Nick McLeod. I mean, the combination of Mac Jones, Najee Harris, and Devontae Smith, they were as good as we thought they were going to be. But it was still kind of just surprising just how easy they made it look. I'm going to pop up the drive chart here. If you look, the first 3 possessions for Alabama, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Here's the time of possession. 2 minutes 36 seconds, 2 minutes 11 seconds, 2 minutes 21 seconds, with drives of 79, 97, and 84. Holy crap. That is ridiculous. I mean, seriously, we keep talking about how easy they made it look. Devonta Smith, I believe the Heisman votes are already in, but
we love Mike. We love to win people Heisman trophies. We've been doing it for years. Myself, I was on two teams that won people Heisman trophies. You know, Matt Leinart and Carson Palmer. Was it Reggie Bush and Carson Palmer? But yeah, it's like end of the year, some stud goes out and just runs circles around us, and we win people Heisman's, and it looks great because it's against Notre Dame from a national perspective. So, yeah, yeah, that you know, we were trending on Twitter. Coach Kelly was trending on Twitter. I saw at halftime. You know, it is what it is. I think those Bama kids go into this game and like the talent gap is so big at call it a handful of position. The talent gap is so big. Like Smith is going out there and be like, these dudes can't. They can't hang with me. So how comfortable is he out there? Like Najee Harris might be like, dude, if I get on the edge, I'm jumping this fool because I know he can't touch me. So um, yeah, I don't know, man. Let's move it on, Mike.
So when we talk about just look, Alabama's this much better. What is it like? Is there anything you really point to specifically and be like, all right, maybe this is the biggest thing? Is it that Najee Harris is just a dude? Devontae Smith's just a dude. Like the
Mm-hmm.
offense. I mean, it's just everywhere they're better than Notre Dame. Maybe Notre Dame had a slightly better offensive line, but I mean, what is it like? What makes Alabama so much better than Notre Dame?
I think it's the culture that they've created there, and the expectations are set where eh, if you don't meet them, you're either out the door, you go down the depth chart, and we got the next guy loaded up. So I think that's really what it is. It's you're getting buy-in from five-star kids that know what the stakes are, and that this is an opportunity. If I start for 1 year, who was the three technique they had that went to the Jets? Quinnen Williams. Like Quinnen Williams was a 1 year starter. He's the next man up, top 10 pick, whatever he was. And he goes out there and does what he's supposed to do, and he gets paid. And it's really that culture, and I think it's all centered around the expectations. Touched on this last week, Mike. I don't know what our expectations are um, specific to football. We have high academic expectations for our kids. We have high character expectations for our kids. Um, and then is it like hope for the best from the football aspect? And I mean, I'm telling you firsthand, dude, because some of these kids that I train, I'll be like, "What about this kid? He doesn't fit. Well, why not? He's a sophomore in high school. He might not have a 3.8 GPA. Maybe he's got a 2.9 GPA. He's only 15 years old, and we're crossing those kids off the list because they're just not a home run academically, and that's got to change. And going back to that culture piece, Mike, I'm going to try and say this as succinctly as I can and as responsibly as I can. When you take certain types of kids, whether it's their background, whether it's their socioeconomic status or whatever, they're friggin' hungrier. And they'll do things on a football field, and they're willing to do things on a football field that somebody that from a different background or from a different life circumstances isn't willing to do. Um, and sometimes you see that effort kind of play out in the football field. Like you saw the end of the game today. Did our kids look upset? Um, you know, so I think it comes down to finding kids that A, love football, B, in some circumstances need football. Um, and you kind of see that desire and that effort and that hunger kind of play itself out in the football field. So that's probably a bit of a rant there, Mike, but that's what I see as a football alum talking to my football alum buddies. Um, I think that probably sums it up.
All right, we're going to start taking questions here from our YouTube audience as well as our blueandgold.com message board. We appreciate everyone who's watching live with us. Question from Samarand. He says, simple request. He says it's simple, but it's a it's gonna be a little bit of a tough question to ask or answer, I should say. Can you guys address the quarterback play during BK's reign at Notre Dame? There's a problem here. Receivers get open. They're not the fastest, but they're open.
Yeah, it's a bit of a discombobulated question. So I wish we had Lou on this pod, Mike, because he could kind of go back through the annals of Notre Dame quarterback history. But Brian Kelly's quarterbacks that he seems to like are a little bit smaller in stature, kind of twitchy in terms of like their play style. But I don't know I don't know ultimately what we're, if you had to stack rank traits of a quarterback, I would love to know. And maybe there's a list for tangibles, it's height, weight, speed, arm strength, all those things. And then there's a list of intangibles. And if you look at Brian Kelly's relationship with his ex-quarterback and Tommy Rees, it's been promoted to an offensive coordinator who's done a good job. He's done a really, really good job for that type of stage that he's been thrust onto. But maybe there's like, as I'm watching that game and you see them roll Drew Pine out as our backup, I'm like, I think some of these intangibles, Mike, in terms of maybe kids that don't have a 5-star type ego, that maybe they're easier to mold into what Brian Kelly wants them to be. I don't know. But I mean, it's an interesting circumstance to look at a kid like Mac Jones, who's, going to be an NFL guy who's already got his master's degree while he's in school, and we didn't offer him. So I don't know. Was he too tall? I don't know. So hopefully that answers that kind of disjointed question there, Michael. Mike, I can't hear you, buddy.
Technical issue. Sorry
There
about
you
that, guys.
go. No, you're
BB
fine.
Bean's
So what?
question says, "What changes would you make to improve the team?" I'm not sure how much time you got, Mike, but anything kind of jumped to the top of your head?
We're a really, really good team. Like are we a top? I think we're probably a top 6 team year in and year out. We're a really good, really, really, really good team. Like hell, I mean Georgia barely. Who won that? Since yeah, Cincinnati covered. Georgia won last second. I mean Cincinnati hung with Georgia. How does Cincinnati hang with Georgia? They go get the right mix of dudes. Um, how would I improve the team? I would bring in slightly, and I'll say this until until I'm blue in the face, Mike. You've got to bring in a few more guys that have a little bit more edge to them. And unironically, those guys with that edge are going to play on the edges. I think you've got to find a way as a coaching staff to be creative and find, why is it that, and Tyree is our outlier this year and Michael Mayer is that outlier, but why is it that these other programs can recruit kids and they play as true freshmen? Like, how many SEC kids play true freshmen at linebacker? All the things that a linebacker has to know and react to and check off of, the mental aspect of the game, that coaching staff finds a way to get that dude on the field because he can flat out run, he can hit, he can cover, he can do whatever. So like Shane Simon's still on the field today. Makes no sense to me. He's not the guy, but like, has he earned the coach's trust or has he earned the right to play because he's been there longer? How do you improve the team? I think you have to bring in a few more guys that just have a little bit different approach to the game and aren't as cookie cutter kind of, I don't want to say like choir boys, because there's guys with more edge is the best way I could put it. And I think those types of guys are going to wind up playing on the edges, and that's probably where we have the biggest like physical gap between the Ohio States, the Alabamas, and the Clemsons of the world. That outside speed.
Ryan H. Says that you're not going to get elite skill positions at Notre Dame with the high academic standards. Is your point to that, Mike, either
Yeah.
lower them
Well,
or Notre Dame can?
it's not like What I'm saying is, academically speaking, Mike, once that kid comes into your program and he's enrolled at your school, the academic standards stay what they are right now. Do you understand? So you're going to graduate, you're going to get a 3.0 GPA plus, and that's it. Like, that's the standard. That's the expectation for you as a Notre Dame football player. I've heard it said before, guys, that the hardest part about Notre Dame academically is getting in. Okay. This is an MIT. It's a great school, but the standards, it's a tough school to get into, small student population, etc. Texting with ex-teammates of mine throughout the course of the game today, I was a captain, pretty good player in college. I had a 2.74 GPA coming out of high school. I was 147th ranked out of 164 kids in my school. I was not a great student, but I got in. And the Dan Saraceno, who was the admissions director at the time, was like, I need you to go back your senior year and take another year of math, and I need you to get a certain score on your ACT. And I was like, yes, sir, got it. Whereas now, I feel like Notre Dame's crossing kids off the list if it's not a home run academically. And I do think not that you need to lower the standards, their standards getting into the school and their standards once you're in the program, but I do think they need to be a little bit more realistic and dangle that carrot for some of these kids. Just be like, this is what Notre Dame can provide for you beyond your playing days. But in order for me to get you in, bud, I need you to bring that GPA up from a 2.9 to a 3.1. And that means turning that B minus into a B plus. Can you do that for me? Versus going, he's got B minuses, forget about him. That's the difference. I hope that makes sense, Mike. Does that make sense?
No, makes perfect sense, and I feel like that's something you've. It's not the first time I've heard you talk about dangling the carrot. I mean, this has been months ever since we hired you, close to a year ago now. You've talked about that. Makes perfect sense
Because
to me.
I've lived it. Yeah, I lived it as a 5-star. I'll never forget it. I showed up at campus for some visit. Coach Madison was a tremendous recruiter. I get out of the car with like a T-shirt and cargo shorts on or whatever. It's 1999. We used to wear cargo shorts back there. You might still, Mike. But
I do. No.
and I knew it. And Coach Madison's like, put a collared shirt on. You're going to meet with the admissions guy. And I was like, oh, my bad. I'll definitely put a collared shirt on because you're just a kid. It's like little things like that. And they were willing to work with you. Whereas now, and I'm not going to call it arrogance, but I've got a corner here in Omaha. He's a Sports Illustrated All-American, Avante Dickerson. Fantastic kid. He will never give you problems. He's so coachable, tremendous kid. Slightly above average student. I brought that to Notre Dame, and I'm like, what do you think about this kid? We can't recruit him. His grades aren't good enough. And he's not a bad student. He's good enough for every other school in the country. And we don't want kids with 6'5" wingspans that run 4.3s apparently playing corner for us. And that's what it's going to take. And I don't know if it's the coaching staff. I've never had the occasion, Mike, to have an honest dialogue back and forth with that coaching staff as it pertains to that. And I don't know who's got the final call there. It's above my pay grade, but that's ultimately what it's going to take, is just to be a little bit more lenient, realistic, and dangle the carrot for some of these high-end recruits academically.
Super chat from Pete says, "Thanks, Mike and Mike. Hope you guys are back next season." I sure hope so too, Mike or Pete. I really do. And also super chat from Ryan. We really appreciate these. The super chats, basically a tip if you enjoy watching our show here. And again, everyone watching live, which is a pretty big group, go ahead and hit the like button live if you're with us, or if you are watching us back. A question from Hond on our blueandgold.com message board. He says, Mike, let's be honest. These two teams aren't that far apart. The differences are secondary. Can't stop the big play. Agree or disagree? I'll go ahead and pull up the game comparison again, because it is, 375 yards. Not getting it done for Notre Dame, but it wasn't a crazy like Alabama. Wasn't a huge total yards disparity. Alabama had 437. Equal amount of first downs between the two teams, 24 apiece. Time of possession, Notre Dame won that, but partly obvious reasons what I outlined earlier, that Alabama didn't really need to hold the ball very long. But so I mean, stats can lie because Alabama didn't really need to try, as we've also discussed. But I guess to go back to his question, thoughts on the Notre Dame secondary. I texted you during the game, Mike, saying, "Man, the secondary, some of these RPOs." I guess part of it's on the linebackers that they're sucking up on the run, but I mean, there's just like 7 yards between a Notre Dame receiver and an Irish defender.
Yeah, and I think the philosophy defensively going into the game was to not give up the big play, and you did see Mac Jones check the ball down many times to Najee Harris, so that was evidence of us kind of giving a healthy cushion back there where he's looking to throw the ball deep. But yeah, I going back to what I talked about earlier, finding guys with an edge to play on the edges. So that's what I mean by that is wide receivers, and conversely, I mean the secondary. Um, so absolutely, it's a shortcoming, and it's very strange. It's very strange when you break down a college football roster. The largest position group is the secondary. They're like 15, 20 dudes in the DB room. And the guys that play for us are a true freshman, a sixth-year senior, Hamilton, another guy who played as a true freshman, and then a true freshman. So it's like that's 4 or 5 guys out of a room full of 15 or 20. Like, so where is everybody else? Like those are the best. Like the best guy we have is a freshman, and Clarence Lewis has played well for being a true freshman. We need, forgetting McLeod. So we need a grad transfer out of a room full of 15, 20 kids, and we need to keep playing a sixth-year senior that's had a myriad of injuries. It makes you raise an eyebrow. I'm like, what the hell are we doing? Right? And we don't have anybody else in the mix. So, yeah, it's a huge area of improvement.
I guess maybe getting on an optimistic point.
Let's.
Yeah. What excites you about next year's team? Personally, Mike, I'm excited for a little quarterback drama. It's gonna be fun. In terms of like quarterback competition, I should say. Um, I think that'll be fun. Brendan Clark, Drew Pine, incoming freshman Tyler Buckner. Do the Irish take a stopgap 1 year grad transfer? Notre Dame also brought in Ron Paulus III. Who knows? Maybe he could even play. Quick super chat from John A1. We really appreciate all the support this year, John. But yeah, Mike, what personally for you, what excites you? I just before you answer, I think that next year's team is going to look a lot different. Not in terms of like um, how the team is constructed, but more of like personnel. There is supposed to be a one-time transfer rule that could be passing, so I think there's going to be transfers across the country. It's going to start looking like NFL, NBA free agency. So I mean, Jeremiah Wusu-Koromoa is probably going to enter the NFL draft. Ian Book is gone. Receiving core is going to look probably completely different with Javon McKinley and Ben Skoranek likely moving on from Notre Dame. So, what excites you, Mike?
It's a little too early to ask if I'm honest, bud. Um, yeah, it's too early to ask. It's too early to ask. Coming off that game, I don't want to move on to next year, but it'll be interesting. I think the quarterback, you working in the media, the quarterback competition is tremendous fodder for you, right?
Right.
Is that going to be is that going to be fun for us as fans to watch that play out? Probably not. Um, we're going to have, just going through some position groups off the top of my head, tremendous running back group. You'll have some shakeup in the offensive line. Wide receivers is going to be a completely different group, almost per man. Tight end group should look strong. Clark Lee's leaving. That's going to be a thing. See what we do to work around that. It's probably too early for me to ask, but I think a lot of fans, I get the sense, and I'm a Tyler Buckner fan. I don't know if I'm any good at evaluating quarterbacks, but to find a way to see what becomes of him. That'll be exciting to watch because he's an exciting player, and it'll be really interesting because his approach to the game and his game in general, he's kind of a gunslinger. He's definitely an athlete back there, and you're gonna what I touched on earlier in terms of what Brian Kelly's evaluating in his quarterbacks. I don't know if you're going to be able to box in Tyler Buckner, kind of rein him in. So that'll be an interesting contrast between genetically his approach to the game and maybe the type of player that Brian Kelly may want him to be. So that'll be an interesting, uh, something interesting to pay attention to over the next few years.
Comment from Jack here. He says Buckner is Kelly's last attempt at winning big. Um, I I'm not sure about that, but how much stock, are you kind of putting on moving forward in Notre Dame football? You assume Brian Kelly's probably got 4 or 5 more years as the Irish head coach. Do you see, Mike, this is another really difficult question to put you on the spot and ask, but do you see Notre Dame, winning a national title in the next decade, or 5 to 10 years, I should say?
If we don't do some of the things that myself and any realistic Notre Dame fan has been discussing for a number of years now, if we don't do some of those things and switch up some academic standards, however you want to label it, no, we won't. It's a 2.5 horse race in college football right now. It's Bama, Clemson, and Ohio State, give or
Right.
take.
Right.
Maybe Georgia, maybe in Oregon. It's a 2 horse race right now. So until one of those guys has some sort of recruiting violation or some sort of off the field thing that sort of knocks them down a peg or two, no, we won't. That being said, one of the first things we talked about when I joined you guys, Mike, at Blue and Gold was fans' expectations, challenging the logic behind their fandom. So, me as a football alum, ex captain, I'm proud of the fact of what Notre Dame can do for young men and the young men that they are coming out of the program. Like, I'm proud of that. So, there's more to being a Notre Dame football player, a Notre Dame athlete in general, than winning national championships. There's more to it than that. Um, but no, I don't see us winning a national championship if you don't switch some things up in terms of your flexible. Maybe that's a good way of phrasing it, Mike, is flexibility in recruiting, not lowering academic standards. That sounds too matter of fact and too black and white. I'm asking for more flexibility in terms of the kids that we let into our evaluation process. That's what it is.
All right. Well, we kind of waiting for other questions to pop in. We'll probably go a few more minutes, see if you guys have anything else. Refreshing our blueandgold.com message board, see if anything else pops in. Also, keep an eye on our YouTube chat. Mike, I had something for you, but I just forgot. So I will ask. Just remembered kind of wrapping up the season. Notre Dame went 10-2, won all sorts of all ACC awards. Jeremiah Koromoa, ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Brian Kelly, ACC Coach of the Year. All this kind of thing. Would you say this season, and this is a very, very, very subjective thing. Some people would say making a bowl game is a success of a season. Other people say national championship or bust. That's it. For you, do you say this is a successful season? I saw a comment on our blueandgold.com message board. Someone said, I'm tired of losing these big games. I would just rather go play Iowa State in the Camping World Bowl, win it, and get my participation trophy to win the end of the year. Like, is this a success of a season for you, or would you rather have like last year where you win that 11th game and you're also 11-2, but you didn't play in that postseason game, or the postseason playoff game? Mike, what do you think?
It's a great question, and whoever posted that on the board, like I would have rather gone and play Iowa State. I don't disagree with that. And getting off of our last call last weekend, we were talking about playoff likelihood, et cetera. And I was like, man, do we even want to make the playoff? Because you know who we're going to end up playing, and it's hate to say it, but it's a bit of a foregone conclusion at that point. But then you run the risk of getting knocked off by Iowa State. So I'd rather lose to Alabama by 14 points than lose to Iowa State in the last minute field goal. But this is a successful season. I don't think there's any question about that. In terms of the COVID year and the tremendous job our kids did of keeping themselves safe and just all the stuff that those kids went through, it's absolutely a successful season. I don't think there's any question about that. It sucks that we had to play, a historic Alabama team. It's got
Right.
2 Heisman finalists, could have been 3. But no, it's a successful season, absolutely.
All right, we'll
And
take.
we should all be appreciative too, though. It's like it's going to be nice to get our Saturday afternoons back, but I think all of us across the country, man, 2020, like we needed something to look forward to, and I hope that we all look forward to watching college football. So it was absolutely a tremendous season in a lot of aspects, and we just had a tough draw. So yeah,
I personally don't want to throw this up there because I think it's a little ridiculous, but let's see. Let's give the fans what they want. Nick Lane says or asks, should Brian Kelly be on the hot seat?
probably not, but it goes back to I'm kind of tired of having the same conversation over and over and over and over again. But it goes back to what are with any job, anybody watching with your career with a job, like what are the expectations for my job? What's the job description? So Brian Kelly's job description is to be ultra competitive, be a top 5 team year in and year out, graduate 100% of your players, maintain a 3.0 GPA. Then he's doing a phenomenal job. I mean, think about like going back to when I was playing, it was like we had Bob Davie and Tyrone Willingham. I think Brian Kelly's been awesome for the program, but I don't think that we've done a good enough job adapting and being flexible enough in recruiting to continue our ascent. So, but based off of what I assume is his job description, Mike, I think he's done a tremendous job, but he won't be on the hot seat. I mean, who else? Yeah, I think Kelly's done a tremendous job, but we need to continue to develop and continue to adapt. We've watched Nick Saban do it. You watch Bill Belichick do it week to week. Like if you're going to be a top flight coach, you've got to adapt your game plan. You've got to adapt your approach. You've got to adapt to the world at large and to what these kids are being exposed to, and adjust your coaching style to get the most out of them. So I do think we need to continue to develop, continue to adapt, be flexible, but no, he's not going to be on the hot seat. He's a great coach. He really is.
Couple more questions that tie in, and then we will get
Can
out of
I
here.
just say one? Can I say one other thing, Mike, real quick? Sorry.
No, please do.
So people fault Kelly. They either fault Kelly or they fault Book for our lack of performance in these big time games. So Kelly doesn't know how to motivate, blah, 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 blah. And so today Ian Book gets hit late out of bounds. Nobody does shit. Like nobody does anything about it. And that's not on Kelly. Like that's on your buddies in the locker room and the dudes in the huddle. So at a certain point in time, you got to get off. Like I'm trying to speak my point without cussing here, Mike. It's a challenge. But like at a certain point in time, like you got to break away from the coaching staff and step up as a young man and like go represent yourself and represent your teammates and represent your brothers in some of these environments. But if those kids are too programmed or over programmed by the coach and they're too robotic, which I do see at times, but we just need to, I'm telling you, we need to mix up the personality types and get more Heinishes and get more like Leah Fouls out there, get more Trembles, get more Kyron, uh, more like enthusiastic type leaders on the team. Uh, and those are the types of things coupled with athleticism that are going to win you those big games. It's not Brian Kelly. It's having a different mix of personality types and with slightly more athletic ability. Like our middle linebacker Drew White is a fullback, dude. Like that's not a big time football player. And then you add to the element that he's doesn't have any stones. Like watching him play, it's just not a good recipe. So it some of that fault should go to Kelly in these big time games, but just as much should be those kids looking at themselves in the mirror and having higher expectations for their level of play, their effort, their drive, all those things, their toughness, um, because that's on them. Brian Kelly's not out there; he doesn't have the helmet on. So sorry.
He's recruiting those kids, so part of it
Yeah,
comes on him for like you touched on. Super chat, Dylan Riggin, $5. We really appreciate that. Last thing before we get out of here, couple of questions that tie in with Tommy Reese. Dell says, "Were you surprised that our play calling was so vanilla? No change of pace, nothing really to keep the Bama defense off balance, and to attempt to match Bama's offensive ability." And then from Jack Foot, he says, "How do you think Tom Reese was this year at offensive coordinator, and where could he improve going forward?"
was I surprised by our lack of creativity in our offense? No, because we haven't seen it thus far. While we pull a rabbit out of the hat prior to the biggest game of the year, right? That'd make too much sense for us to do. We did see some screens today. We did see a little bit of hurry up, but like it's so bizarre where these pregame interviews and such, like Brian Kelly was interviewed by ESPN or ABC or whatever, and he was like, "Yeah, we're going to show a little bit of hurry up." It's like, well, that's smart. Let's telegraph what we're going to do going into the game. And then they also mentioned during the broadcast they'll have these pre-game production meetings with various members of the team, coaching staff, what have you. The broadcast crew will. And Coach Kelly said, if Kyron Williams doesn't have 10 catches this game, we're doing something wrong. So one could draw a straight line between him wanting to get Kyron Williams 10 catches. Um, you could draw a straight line between that and like, oh yeah, we're not going to push the ball down the field. We're planning on checking the ball down. That's our game plan. And you vocalize that to the production team before a game. It's bizarre to me as I'm just, that's bizarre. What could you do more? There's no shifts. Like only kind of shifts we ever see is you do see them motion Kyron out a little bit. We don't, modern day football gang is a game of, this isn't me trying to be like super high football IQ guy. This is very basic stuff. Modern day football is creating mismatches. So we want to line up and knock the snot out of people and be braggadocious about that aspect of our game. But it's taking a Michael Mayer, it's taking a Tommy Tremble, it's moving pieces around to create mismatches. And that does take some creativity. So we've got these smart kids, right? So why can't they handle a little bit more in terms of their workload, their mental workload, and add more things to the offense pre-snap, make some of these more athletic teams adjust. And that, again, tamps down their aggressiveness. So that's what you just like to see more creativity in terms of like pre-snap stuff and then helping create more mismatches versus just that kind of and run an RPO for crying out loud. So we recruit these athletic quarterbacks, but then I don't know, man. I watched enough games and I showed you that text message during the game on that third and goal. I won $20 on a text message bet with my buddy. I was like, we're going to run it with Ian Book here. And I watch pretty intently, but I don't watch football as intently as Nick Saban does. So if I knew it was coming, I'm sure he did.
All right. Well, again, guys, we really appreciate everyone. We've done these live shows after every game this season for Notre Dame, and I've had a blast. I appreciate some of you guys who have really tuned in with us all season long. We will be back next season, and in between, Mike Goolsby and myself will have some recruit breakdowns, talking about the guys coming in. We were doing that a lot with Mike before the season started, breaking down Notre Dame's 2021 recruits. Well, we've got about a dozen that have joined the Irish class since. that Mike and I haven't talked about together. So we will break all those guys down. Notre Dame's 2021 class, very good, at least in my opinion. Does it close the gap against Clemson and Alabama? That's still left to be determined. But for Mike Goolsby, I'm Mike Singer, and for the final time this season, signing off. Appreciate everyone, and make sure to go to blueandgold.com for all your Notre Dame Fighting Irish football and basketball coverage.